Final Stop Brasil, Chapter 11. Hard Lessons of a Teenager. Puppy Love. My parents belonged to the post-war generation. Therefore, they would save on each and every corner. My mother strictly bought only the special offers in the supermarket, and my father made sure that gas would not be used too much. For this reason, it was only once a week permitted to take a hot bath. This meant the rest of the week washing with cold water. But the older I grew, the more the lack of hygiene, but also the unpleasant smell of my parents disturbed me. I couldn't stand eating off the same plate as my father. Sometimes he would push it over to me, maybe to save washing up lotion. I revolted. My father felt personally accused by this and punished me with slaps in the face. But a real beating I would take if I refused to eat the Sunday meal my father had cooked. He was without a doubt a very good cook, but if he stirred the food with the same spoon he used before to try the cooking, putting it into his mouth, that was it for me. When I saw it, I just reckoned it disgusting and wouldn't eat. At 12 years, my appearance was that of a completely developed woman, with breasts too large for my taste. I had my menstruation on a regular basis. When it began, I showed my mother, terrified by the blood, and she gave me washable sanitary towels with the comment, "It is normal that now it comes every month." But soon I revolted against this mess and insisted on disposable pads. Also, I took a bath every day in the tub, even if it was accompanied by daily shouting. Elke was now no longer living at home. She moved in with her future in-laws. It was a heavy blow to my mother when her favorite daughter was no longer at home. But the consolation was the future son-in-law, who fulfilled all the expectations of my parents as a high school graduate with a civil service career. Carmen was pregnant again, but by whom remained a mystery. Thus, a new scandal blossomed in our house. But my ex-brother-in-law was back and became once again my brother-in-law and quickly saved the situation. Inside of me, I was still a child who played with Barbie dolls, building up a dream world around me. My great passion were animals, though. My parents didn't pay me any pocket money, but I earned it myself by walking the dogs of other people. Not only did I earn good money, but also affection. Many older ladies gave me sweets, or they invited me for coffee and cake. I loved all these dogs, and they also loved me. I myself could not even have thought in my dreams about a dog of my own. Therefore, I bought myself a hamster, with cage and all. My father was close to an attack, because I forgot to ask my parents before permission. My mother wasn't too happy about this either, because the hamster was running at night in its wheel with lots of noise, robbing her sleep. Unfortunately, the little hamster died after only 1 week. The hairdresser of my mother offered me to take over her hamster. How she explained to me she didn't have any time. The same evening, I was on my way and came back with an animal twice as big as my former hamster. My father, who slept during the day and went to work for night shift, was scared to death as he came back the following morning and was just about to kill the rat when my mother got up and explained to him that this was not a rat, but my new hamster. Very soon it became clear why this hamster was so big. One morning, I found 5 small, naked rat hamster babies in the cage. My parents were going crazy. To calm them down, I gave away 4 and stayed with the mother and 1 baby. The hamsters were followed by a turtle, and after that a kitten. But this kitten developed to be a big wild cat, which chose the lid of the toilet as its favorite place. And this place it decided not to share with anybody. But the first time I and the cat went into a battle over the toilet and it tried to attack me with its claws, I gave it a swing with my right hand and sent it flying into the corner of the bathroom. Due to this, I was the only one who just needed to look at its eyes and tell it, "Fuck off from the toilet," and it jumped down from its throne. The rest of my family had great respect for the tomcat, which turned out to be fatal if I wasn't in the house. My passion for animals began this way to turn into a nightmare for my parents. At some point, all of my friends and schoolmates began with their first experiences with boys and talked about their first kisses. Sabine and Heike told me proudly they were having a grown-up boyfriend. He had his own flat where they visited often and where some kinds of games were taking place. This boyfriend, so they told me, was taking photos of the two girls naked. I couldn't judge if this was normal or not, and the word pedophile at those times I had not heard of. But I didn't have anybody to ask. My grandma was far away. So I began to wonder if I was maybe not normal. Of course, I also had somebody I adored. There was the rocker with the long hair, the soft face, and his beautiful brown eyes, who I had a special crush on. And when he drove by with his moped and stopped at the pomfret store that just had opened right opposite of our house, where I had a good look over the scene by our kitchen window, I rushed to buy pomfrets at the same time. But he never even paid attention to me, and so it was left to silent adoration, during which I always forgot to eat my pomfrets. But me holding hands or kissing with a boy from my class, that I couldn't imagine at all. Therefore, I was the only one who didn't have anything to say about this important subject on the schoolyard. As I watched several times my schoolmate, Gabi, how she entered the car of her boyfriend, who picked her up regularly from school, also went in and out of her parents' house and stayed the night like it was the most normal thing in the world, I had enough. I decided to change my condition, and this as soon as possible. I too wanted to have something to say about this subject. One of these long-haired types, constantly hanging around near our school, were watching me. This didn't escape my attention. He wasn't good-looking or very likable, but he was only supposed to serve his purpose. Therefore, I changed the side of the road to where he was standing and passed him slowly. This he took as occasion to talk to me. First we talked about trivial things, until he asked me if I would like to go for a walk with him. I agreed, and we walked side by side. As we walked toward the forest, he took my hand. I felt this as extremely unpleasant, and tried to pull my hand back, but he took it even tighter. Arriving at a very bushy area, he tried to kiss me. This I didn't want at all. I wanted to turn back. "You stay right here. The fun is only just beginning," he announced in a threatening voice. Here I realized I had brought myself into great danger. Unfortunately, this insight came too late. He pushed me to the forest floor and pulled at my clothes. I fought desperately and begged him not to let me go. He threatened to kill me if I wouldn't stop crying, but I didn't stop. I was sobbing when he tore off my jeans and my pants. Then I saw within my reach a large stone, and for a moment I thought of smashing it over his head, but I was too frightened to do so. While he tried to penetrate into me, as he tried also to turn my head to kiss me, but I fought to turn away in disgust. It was all so disgusting, and I kept trying to fight him, but I didn't have a chance. After several attempts to penetrate into me, he gave up and yelled that I should disappear. At the time, I didn't know why I was spared the worst. It was only later that I realized He couldn't rape me because his penis wasn't stiff. The guy suffered from impotence. As I hurriedly dressed, he threatened to cut my throat if I should tell anybody about this. Crying, I ran all the way home where my father was expecting me. He was angry at the sight of me, dirty from the forest floor and from crying, and also because I was late. Instead of comfort, protection, and security, I was slapped. But I was still lucky that my mother at this time was on a self-realization trip and working. Otherwise, it would have been much worse for me. For weeks, I suffered quietly over this nightmare by myself, because there was nobody to whom I could have talked. So I tried as best as I could to repress it. This was quite difficult, though, because the guy continued to appear near the school, and if nobody was near, he made the symbolic gesture with a hand on his neck to remind me of this threat. I experienced terrible anxiety and suffered from nightmares. I distanced myself from Sabine and Heike. Somehow, I blamed them for what had happened. Again and again, all these talks about boyfriends and why I don't have one. By the fact that my mother worked in the self-service restaurant in the only shopping store of the town, I was often alone at home. When my father was on the night shift every 2 weeks, he normally slept during the day, and I also had my peace and quiet. All of my schoolmates who visited me from time to time bored me, while Sweet, Slade, and Alice Cooper were in for everyone. I heard for the first time about black music and soul. I was fascinated by these amazing black voices and the romantic sound. This was my world. I wouldn't share with nobody. On television was launched a new music program. There already was the Beat Club for a long time, but now was disco. Here I could partly see the people to whom these wonderful voices belonged, and was fascinated by these beautiful people. Of course, I saw a few blacks before on television, but now I looked at them with a totally different consciousness. Once I mentioned about my enthusiasm for these black men towards my mother. For her it was almost like a criminal offense. The Negroes are very different from us, never get any silly ideas. In addition, a black man needs more than just one woman. They all have more women at the same time. I did wonder what she meant by very different. Were not all human beings equal? And how she came across this knowledge that all these black men needed more than one woman has always been a mystery to me. For my two sisters, it became an obligatory duty to come by every Sunday with their attachment for coffee or during summertime for the barbecue. When everybody was gathered, they changed the newest gossip in and outside the family. Sometimes I sat down with them when it seemed interesting enough to listen. And this time it was interesting. My mother was not authorized for holidays during her first 6 months of work. The peace in the house was gone because my father was raging, and for my mother existed nothing else anymore beside her work. But it turned out even better. My father was jealous, not just about her work, but about the cook of the restaurant, because my mother knew only one subject, the cook. This was an amusing story for the entire family, and for me it was something entirely new, that sentiments like jealousy existed between my parents. Besides, I could not imagine that any man could find my mother attractive. In my eyes, with her 42 years, she looked simply old for her age. Another issue came in between, always back as main topic. The old straw house of my grandmother, and what should be done with it. I had no idea about real estate values, especially in holiday areas, but I offered with enthusiasm to take over the house later on. For me it was clear a long time already that I would never stay in this town. I had clear plans to renovate the old house, and during summertime I could offer rooms for rent. My sisters did not show the slightest interest in the house, but my father took me serious for the first time and suggested to manage the house so long until I was old enough to take it over. But Carmen, who thought of nothing else but money, then spoke about the threat that caused all of the plans to come to nothing. You take the house, you need me to pay 1/3 of the value of the entire plot, and the other third to Elke. And this will be so much that you will never get happy in your life again. I knew my oldest sister well enough to know she was serious. For her, nothing was more important in life than money. My life changed, and I fell into a whirlwind of emotions. Still avoiding my friends, I preferred to dwell in another part of town, with new people in the youth center. Officially, this was a youth meeting place, but in reality, it was like a drug hell. Hashish was smoked here, cocaine and heroin openly traded. The people were hanging around quite high, listening to loud rock music like Deep Purple, Jethro Tull, and Uriah Heep. The music was, except for one track of Deep Purple, which I quite liked, absolutely not my type. But not everyone was on drugs. There were also the types like me, who were clean and only wanted to play the offered games or billiards. One of them was Rainer, 2 years older than me, and a handsome boy with dark brown eyes and hair. He never left my side. He kept asking if I would go out with him, but I was not ready yet to involve myself with anybody. My wound was still too deep. Instead, I ran after a phantom, Michael. 18 years old, tall, blond, and because his addiction to heroin, terribly thin. If he came to the youth center, I forgot Rainer, whom I really liked very much. In addition to books about Africa, slavery, and the history of America, I now also devoured books on drug addiction. When the film Christiane F., Wir Kinder vom Bahnhof Zoo, in English as Children from the Station Zoo, came out, I was among the first who watched this dramatic movie. And while I thought of Michael, I cried. Again and again, I tried to convince Michael to stop the pushing. We talked a lot together, and he was a good listener, although he did not see me as a woman, but for what I was, a naive girl. Therefore he never touched me. Rita, promise me that you'll never touch this stuff and never take other drugs. You're a nice girl, and I want you to stay that way. I gave him that promise, without knowing that I would never see him again. Shortly afterwards, my friend Dagmar, who also came sometimes to the youth center, called me to tell me that Michael was dead. It was like a stab in the heart. Overdose? I asked. No, it was not. He fell from a railway bridge. But Dagmar knew people from the drug scene and learned that it was no accident. He was thrown from the bridge, killed for drug debts. For days I was feeling bad, and I shed many tears. Again and again I saw Michael in our last meeting before me. Dagmar, Rainer, and Sabine, who was now going out with Rainer's brother Peter, tried to cheer me up. But it took some time until I could laugh again. The 4 of us went with Peter's car for drives, or spent time at Rainer's and Peter's house, where we played some board games. It was all harmless, and Rainer's parents saw it exactly like that. I was always welcome. Especially Rainer's mother liked me very much. For my father, however, the alert level turned to red, because he smelled danger in all male beings that approached me. And there were a few. I became very aware of my feminine charms and flirted in all directions. Also, I was never serious about it, but that changed when another Michael came into my life. 15 years old, but by his size and stature older looking, very handsome, and therefore all the girls at our school tried to get him. He had recently moved with his mother and his elder brother to our neighborhood. His attention was only on me, and I felt for the first time I was in love. I had butterflies in my stomach. We were inseparable, and he introduced me to his mother, who welcomed me affectionately. Often we cooked together, and I learned a lot from her. Michael was not afraid to introduce himself to my parents, where he was less warmly received. But after the first thunderstorm, my father got himself used to the idea that I now had a steady boyfriend. Michael was the first and only one who was allowed to approach me. He was very experienced for his age, and it was a bright madness. I thought I could not live any more without Michael. With him I felt very protected and sheltered. My parents, however, were watching with increasing nervousness, and my father threatened me. "If you're coming home with a child, I'll kill you." They invited Michael's mother for coffee, or more to a crisis meeting, to share their concerns with her. After that, she often tried to avoid leaving us alone. This led to arguments between her and Michael. But their precautions would not have been necessary anyway, because I was afraid so much of the threats from my parents, I didn't even allow that we slept together. Also, Michael took precautions by using condoms. Often he felt frustrated when we both were so much excited, and he could feel how much I wanted him too. But shortly before it would happen came a resounding no from me. This created controversy between us, and we didn't see each other for days. During those days, I had my first experience with alcohol, and this in such an extreme that it was almost enough for the rest of my life. I drank myself to the brink of alcohol poisoning. At this time, there was an anise liqueur in fashion, which left no alcohol breath. However, the effect of brushing teeth when one thought to be sober again was as if you drank a whole bottle all over again. My friends had to drag me home and explain to my parents that I was just feeling bad and they would get me into bed. "No, no, you don't bother. We take care of Rita," Sabine would say to keep my mother away from me, who wanted to check what was going on. For days I was sick. However, it never lasted long before Michael was standing at the door and we reconciled. He swore that he could not live without me. I was his great love.